There is an interesting scene in the book of Matthew where a mother intervenes for her two sons with Jesus. I want to read it to you because I think it reflects very much on the question that is before us. That question is, how do I participate in the sufferings of Christ? What does it mean that I complete his sufferings? Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, "What do you want?" She said to him, "Now listen, say that these two sons of mine are to sit, one on your right hand and one on your left in your kingdom." In other words, this mother wants her two sons, James and John, to have a place of prominence on the right hand and the left hand of Jesus when he becomes king. Clearly, she did not understand the significance of that, as we're going to see in Jesus' response to her. Hi, I'm Dr. Chuck Betters with MARKINC Ministries. We exist for the purpose of offering help and hope to hurting people. And I would encourage you, if you are enjoying these Ask Dr. Betters videos, that you pass the word along to others who can subscribe by going to our website at markinc.org. That's MARKINC.org. This mother raises a very difficult question. It's clearly one she did not understand. She wants her two sons to have places of prominence when Jesus comes into his kingdom, but she didn't understand what that meant. Because Jesus answered her. He says, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?" There's the first reference to the cup. They said to him, "We are able. We are able." He said to them, "You will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the two brothers. But Jesus called them to him and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The mother of James and John wanted her two sons to have this place of prominence. We also know that John was at the foot of the cross when Jesus was crucified. We also know that his mother was there. You have to wonder what she must have been thinking when she looked up at the cross and also saw a cross on his right hand and his left hand. She must have thought to herself, what in the world was I asking for? How could I have possibly wanted my sons to sit on his right hand and his left hand? They would have been up on these crosses instead of these two thieves. But Jesus told her and told these disciples, "You will have a cup to drink." What does he mean by that? Well, what he doesn't mean by that is that the cup of salvation that comes only through his shed blood would be theirs to drink. It would be theirs to offer to other people. In other words, they could not save anyone. The cup that they would drink would be a cup of suffering. Jesus promised his disciples two things. He promised them that they will suffer in this world, and he promised them that they will have joy in this world. And the joy and the suffering are married together. How can this be? I believe we need to picture it this way. There is a cup of suffering that is part of the world in which we live. It's part of being related to Christ through salvation. In other words, every Christian must drink something from this cup of suffering, some to a greater extent than others, some to the extent that the Apostle Paul had to go through, and others go through life basically unscathed, but still have some form of suffering in this world. What does he mean when he talks about drinking of the cup of suffering? There is a cup that until it is completely filled with the suffering of God's people, Christ will not come until that cup is completely filled. Every drop that goes into that cup accumulates over the course of many, many years until that cup overflows. And when it begins to overflow, then the end will come. There is a cup of suffering that the church must endure. Every Christian must enter into the sufferings of Christ. We must be willing to suffer. Now, in the early church, they understood this, maybe to a fault, because in the early church, some of the Christians looked for ways to get martyred. And that was strongly condemned by the early church. We must not seek martyrdom. But if martyrdom comes, we must embrace it. That was the thinking of the early church, that they all expected to die for their faith. They all expected to be martyred for their faith. You know, we American Christians don't understand the pain and the suffering that the church is enduring worldwide. We don't understand the suffering that Christians, for example, in China, are experiencing, the underground church that's there, or in North Korea, or in the Muslim countries, where Christians are gathering in caves and tents and in the woods to suffer for their faith, to embrace the suffering that comes with just simply being a Christian. We Americans, we go to church or we don't go to church. We love America or we hate America. We love our faith or we hate our faith. We have been spoiled by our own freedoms. And yet our eyes need to be open to the fact that around the world, that this cup that I referred to is being filled. Every single day, it's being filled with people who are suffering for their faith, who are being persecuted for their faith, who are being beheaded for their faith. We Americans don't understand that. We think that when someone speaks evil of us, that that's suffering. And in a way it is, in a form it is. But that cup of suffering that people must endure, that the church must endure, is a part of that cup Jesus referred to when he said, you will have to drink from this cup. Not in order to save people, but because suffering is a part of the brokenness that we experience in this world. And suffering for Christ teaches us how to be sons and daughters of Christ, how to experience his love and his grace because we suffer for him. And the Bible tells us that if we suffer as a Christian, we are to rejoice. We are to be joyful. We are to thank God for the suffering because it draws us closer to him. But then he says, but if you're going to suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer, there's no glory in that. That's on you. But if we are to suffer as a Christian, we are to rejoice in the fact that we are entering into the sufferings of Jesus Christ. I hope this helps.